Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Berenshausen, and welcome to this installment of Ron's Reviews, a discussion with Ron McFarland about what he's reading, what he's thinking about in open organization space. Today, we're joined by Ron, who's going to take us through a great presentation and some of his thinking about sustainable development, talking about the intersection between open organizations and sustainable economic development. Ron, thanks for joining us. Great to see you.
Hi, how are you, Brian?
Doing great. Thanks a lot. Why'd you pick this topic to write about, Ron?
Yeah, Brian, you remember some time ago, I wrote an article on nuclear power, particularly fourth generation nuclear power, and how that's going to revolutionize energy generation around the world.
I do remember that.
Yeah, well, that article, when I thought about it, I thought it was a little bit too narrow in its scope. And also, I've done a lot of studying on energy generation for the future, and it looks like solar is going to be strong and wind is going to be strong. So there's going to be a lot of different kinds of technology coming into this area. And I thought just nuclear power is too narrow. And also, this is going to impact on the entire global economy. So how does it impact on the global economy and such? And I started studying around, and I came up with a study on sustainable development, and that's economic development.
Right.
In this particular article, I'm going to address environmental concerns, but also I'd like to also address human suffering concerns, and then bring this all together and think about how can we govern these issues? How can we bring them together? So that's how it all started. And going just to the next slide, this is where I got the research.
Yeah. Where'd you find the research for all this?
Yeah, basically, it's a guy from Columbia University called Jeffrey Sachs, and his book is The Age of Sustainable Development. Now, he wrote that several years back, and he works with the United Nations. As a matter of fact, just right now, Brian, he has done a seminar on this, and you can see I put it down at the bottom of this slide here, the SDG Academy. That's Sustainable Development Goals, and that's the. Have you heard, Brian, of this? The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals?
I haven't. Well, I should say I have, because spoiler alert, I've read your article, right? So I have from you, but not outside this discussion, no.
Okay, basically around 2000, 2001, the United Nations set up some goals on what to do about environmental problems. And they called it the MDG. That's the Millennium Development Goals. And there was 8 of them only, and that ended in 2015. From 2015 on, they expanded it to 17 goals, and that's what I want to talk about in this. And this is what the book is about: those 17 sustainable development goals. And that's where I got all the research. So this is really not my pure research; it's really his.
But what you bring to it, Ron, is an emphasis on open organization principles. So what do open organization principles have to do with sustainable economic development?
Right. Well, the main issue, these are issues that are global in nature. No single company, no single department, no single section can handle it. You've got to go external to your organization to solve these problems. Not even at the business level, but even at the government level. One single government cannot solve these problems. You've got to go outside. And that's where I thought the open organization principles would come into play.
Interesting.
So going to the next slide, let's take a look at our principles. I thought the biggest problem with this is in our principles, we've got to find out what we want to do first. Then we can start a community to attack that problem. So I thought the best thing to do is start with the principle of transparency. Now, transparency, if I just say environmental damage, what can you do with that? You cannot do very much. So you've got to dig down a little bit to get to something you can actually measure. And that's where the transparency comes in. You've got to dig down. Now with the Sustainable Development Goals, what they've did is they have a certain goal. Under that goal, they have various detailed targets. Under those targets, they have very, very detailed indicators. From the indicators, you can measure those indicators, and also you can start to work on it. So once you dig down, you get the transparency going, then you can start building a community. You can gather people who are interested in solving this particular problem. For example, in my neighborhood, believe it or not, just next to us, there is a garbage processing facility. You think it's a garbage dump, but don't think that way. It processes the garbage in the neighborhood. We don't smell it. We don't feel it. We don't. What they do is they process the garbage. Within Tokyo, there are 23 of them because there are 23 basically cities. This is a metropolitan area with 23, you might say cities, or you could say districts, however you want to do it. Each one of them has a processing zone. And what they do is they teach what you call the 3 R's. One is for reducing. Reduce your garbage in any way you can. If you don't need it, don't buy it. Don't waste, basically. The next R is don't throw something away if you can reuse it or you reuse it somewhere else. The third, of course, is recycling it, processing it, and use it again. And that's what that processing facility does right next to it. And it's less than 1/20 of the garbage is actually thrown away.
Wow.
It's all processed into something else. Okay, now that could be a goal. You can build your community of teaching children how to use the 3 R's. And of course, they do it in the schools here all the time. So that is an example of digging down, making the problem very, very transparent, building a community to solve that problems. Once you build a community, then you can start collaborating. All right, what do I want to do to teach the 3 R's, for example? What is most important? What is better? Looking at the 3 R's, you'll notice actually reduce is actually the cheapest. And then reusing something, because I'm purchasing it once, it's a little bit more expensive. And then recycling, that means you've got to go through a second process. That's a little bit more expensive than that. So number 1 of the 3 R's is reduce. Don't just buy things and throw it away. Be careful with your things. So that's an example of digging down. We can collaborate on this. We can talk about it. And then hopefully we'll come up with some kind of plan. And maybe we don't know what to do. We need more help. So that's where you have to bring maybe a specialist in, maybe a teacher in, maybe someone from another community. What have they done somewhere else? Has this happened somewhere else? So this is where exclusivity comes into play, not just a few people in our neighborhood, or inclusivity. That's where that comes into play. And of course, if you run into problems, then you have to adapt and adjust. If it didn't work, you've got to back up and you can try something else. If it works, you can move right on to the next problem. Start digging down, trying to find out what the next problem is. But if there is a problem, then you might have to go back and start collaborating again. You might start asking some questions again. The most important thing here is stay in this loop, the open organization principles loop, as long as it takes until you have the problem under control. And that is the issue. What happens on many projects, you start them and you never finish them. Or you start them, you've never achieved what you wanted to do.
That's right. And especially with something like with environmental damage and sustainable economic development, they seem like such huge problems, right? They seem like such large, broad subjects, right? This helps break it down a bit.
Right. And there's something that it'll never really go away, but at least we can get it under control. Once it gets under control, we can put systems in place, and the systems will kick in, and we can, let's say, we can back off from that point with the system or other people carrying the load of execution and such.
Right. So, yeah, take us through how you might apply this to issues of environmental impact and environmental damage.
Okay, yeah, have a look at the next slide and look at right in the center of this. You notice that blue area?
I do.
Okay, basically these are all of the areas where there is environmental and ecological damage going on right now. You can say they're 9, you could say they're 10, basically, but those are the major areas. And this is what I was saying. I was only thinking about energy generation when I made that article on nuclear power. But there are a lot of issues that have to come into play. It is not just energy. It's energy, it's agriculture, and it's industry. All of those play a role. Now, if you stay within that blue area, that's basically nature will take care of the problem by itself. But if human beings, let's say, overextend what their activities are, then nature cannot really keep up. And what this chart basically is, that you can Google this, it's planetary borders, or boundaries, sorry. Okay. Planetary boundaries. So you're going outside of the boundary that nature can handle. And you'll notice there are 3 of them there. One is climate change, another is nitrogen cycles, and another is the rate biodiversity loss. Those 3, and those, for example, just taking an example of those 3, let's take a look at climate change. Climate change is really because it's the creation of greenhouse gases that human beings, let's say, put into the atmosphere, particularly CO2. Now, here again, for an example for that, how do we address that problem? Now, I'm having, let's say, different data coming in. Bill Gates, he says one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases is the production of steel and concrete. We don't think about that. We think about, for example, fossil fuel burning from gasoline automobiles or internal combustion. But he says that it's steel production and concrete. So there are a lot of them. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to select one and ignore all the others. All of them are important. So, for example, that is an area we could address. We can start digging down, finding some areas where we can work. So that's one. Another is the nitrogen cycle. This is really, nitrogen is one of the substances used in chemical fertilizers. And if those fertilizers are overused, then they will run into the environment around you and cause damage. So how do I solve that? One is you've got to come up with some kind of fertilizer that does not damage the environment. Also, you've got to deliver a more appropriate amount of fertilizer. Not too much, not too little, just enough to give the, let's say, the crops the nutrition they need, but not so much that it's going to run into the into the environment. So that's another example, and they're working on that. Also, phosphorus falls into the same category, but it's under control right now. And the last one is biodiversity. Biodiversity, of course, I've been to one rainforest in the world, and that was in Costa Rica. I have not been to the largest ones, but there are 3 major rainforests in the world. One is in the Amazon basin, one is in the Congo, which is right in the center of Africa, and one is in Indonesia archipelago. I've been close to all them, but I've never been to those. I've been to Venezuela and I've been to Paraguay. So I've just been north and just been south of the Amazon. For the Congo, I've been to Cameroon, which is just north of the Congo basin, and Indonesia, I've been over to Bali, but Bali this is really on the island of Borneo where that is. In that area, there's a tremendous amount of different kind of vegetation and animals. Now they're being destroyed because people want to chop down all the trees and they want to grow crops and such, particularly palm oil, which we use in a lot of substances. And that has got to be put under control. And that's what they're working on from now on. So that'll give you an example. Now, what you've got to do, as I say, in transparency, you've got to dig down deeper and get into a specific activity. Okay?
Interesting. Yeah, that helps a lot. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, now here is just looking at the CO2 emissions over time.
Mm-hmm.
Going back 800,000 years, the CO2 emissions has gone up a little bit, gone down a little bit, gone up a little bit, gone down a little over this 800,000 year period. And then around the start of the Industrial Revolution, around the 1800s until now, basically, that's when the human beings started to move away from animal power and started moving toward the burning of fossil fuels, particularly coal. In those early days, coal was king. Coal was the energy source for everything. And it really took off around 1950.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the burning of fossil fuels really took off, obviously with automobiles.
Mm-hmm.
And they continue to use it and continue to use burning fossil fuels. And you can see that line where the CO2 emission just went straight up,
Right.
straight up like an arrow.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is about 80% of our energy right now comes from the burning of fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what we've got to do from now on is we've got to figure out a way to reduce the burning of fossil fuels to get energy. We still want energy. I mean, I should say we still want a good economy.
Right.
We do not want to destroy the economy. We do not want to destroy our livelihood and such. We want to just do it in such a way where it doesn't kill the environment. So
Mm-hmm.
we want the economy to stay stable,
Mm-hmm.
and we want the environment to be protected at the same time. We don't want to damage one to help the other.
I see. I see.
You follow what I mean? So that's what we've got to do.
And that's what you mean by sustainable development, right? Like how do we...
And that's what we mean by sustainable. I'm sustaining the environment while building the economy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've got to do. So we've got to look for energy sources that will not destroy the environment. And that's, of course, why electric vehicles are becoming popular more and more. And the more I study this, Brian, it's amazing. It looks like electric vehicles are going to be coming in the market much faster than I ever dreamed.
Mm.
And one of the reasons for that is not only the development of better batteries, but the batteries themselves are getting cheaper. And the prices are coming down so fast that they will even compete with nuclear and all of the others. And it looks like electricity and solar power and such. Solar power and wind power have one major problem, and that is they're climate dependent.
Mm-hmm.
When the sun doesn't shine, they cannot produce electricity. But when the sun shines and you can capture a lot of energy and store that energy in a very, very powerful battery,
Mm-hmm.
then during the time where the climate is bad, you can use the energy in the battery.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And that's something that's very new. And I didn't learn this until just very, very recently.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that's becoming very, very interesting. Not only the batteries getting better, they're also getting cheaper. And as those prices come down, they're going to probably wipe away all internal combustion engines.
I see. I see.
And with this, how can information technology play a role?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm interested in here. How can they do it, particularly in agriculture? Mm-hmm. Now you're having sensors that'll go right into the fields, can sense how much phosphorus is in the soil. Mm-hmm. And how can you share that? And where do I plant? How much fertilizer is needed? How much runoff is it? All of this information is going in agriculture, and that's just one of them.
Right.
Also, we're going to be having automatic driving cars and a lot of things, which will impact on the use of burning fossil fuels. So this is very, very fascinating.
Yeah. But now, you've shown here what's fascinating about that is, this is not a new issue. These problems have been around for quite a while. You're talking about, over half a century of development here. And you've identified, sort of a method for beginning to address the issues. You've identified some problem spaces that you want to tackle. Why do these continue to be problems, do you think?
Yeah, this next slide, which I'm just showing right now. Yeah, for some reason or another, we keep on thinking, why hasn't people addressed this?
Mm-hmm.
And this is Sachs's data now. This is his
Okay.
data, really. What he basically says, one is this is a global problem. And that's why I say this is an open organization principle problem,
Mm-hmm.
because there's no boss. There's no one to tell us what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to build a team, and we've got to attack it really at the ground level to solve these problems. And then we're going to promote it. And that's what they're trying to do at the UN.
Uh-huh.
And that's what they were trying to do with these the Sustainable Development Goals.
I
They
see.
present these goals. They have people, and that's what the Paris Accords was all about.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the goals. What do you want to do in your country?
Mm-hmm.
And they had each country commit to some kind of goal.
Mm.
Now, a lot of them right now, up to now, honestly, they commit their goals, but they're not achieving their goals. And by transparency, they're exposing that you're not achieving your goals. And then you can find out, why are you not achieving your goals? And then we can help you achieve them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they're attacking it here again from a global level. And that's problem number one. There's no boss. There's another is, of course, the oil industry and a lobbyist and such. They have here again, oil and coal. They don't want to have their market completely wiped away with another energy source. So they're going to be pushing back on this, particularly Russia. Russia's a country that is dominated by fossil fuel energy sales. And that's their main economy, unfortunately, for Russia. They're going to be fighting back, and all the oil producing countries will be fighting back on this. So we have to understand there's short-term special interest groups there. Another one is this, these changes in the environment and environmental problems don't happen suddenly. It's a gradual change, so you really can't feel it. Once you might have a typhoon, but you don't know if that's connected with global change, environmental change and such. So another is impact on time frames. Another is the current environment is really, this is an engine run, the current environment engine is run off of fossil fuels. So you've got to change the structure of the current economic environment. And that's going to take some time. That's going to take some time. Another is it's slow moving, as I say. You can't feel it every day or week or month. This is a yearly thing, gradual yearly thing. So you can't see it every day, so you just ignore it and you just attack problems that are coming at you directly. So that's another reason why and also it's very, very complicated. There are many, many reasons for it, and so you just don't know where to start. And that's what I'm trying to do, Brian, in this particular presentation. Just pick one of them, work on it, and see if it works. And then if you achieve that, go to the next one. But you cannot, there's a lot of them out there, and you just have to find one and work on it.
Well, what are some examples? Do you have any examples that you can share, places to start?
Yeah, here's some examples of how to start. For example, one is just take a look at your own home. How much of the energy is being released from your home that you want to keep in it, and how much are you spending to warm up your building and such? So warming and cooling your own facility. How can I build a building that is naturally keeping me warm in the wintertime and naturally keeping me cool in the summertime? So that's one way to do it. As a matter of fact, I have my, my great nephew. That is my wife's sister's grandson. Now he's starting I just met him a couple of days ago. He's majoring in architecture. And I asked him, why are you interested in architecture? And he says, because I want to improve the efficiency of buildings today, particularly in the cities, for energy. So it's exactly what he is majoring in. So that's where his attention is going to be.
Right.
Another one, of course, is we talked about EV or electric vehicles. Electric vehicles, Well, gradually now, I think they may be worldwide, they may be 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Within the next 10 years, they may be up to 30 or 40%. And gradually over time, internal combustion engines will fall by the wayside, gradually working their way off the market. So that's another one. Another one is we talked about agriculture, we talked about fertilizer and such. Fertilizer use and crop efficiency, and here again using information technology in the agriculture area is going to be very, very interesting. So that's an area where you can put some attention to overcome some of these environmental problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another is energy. This is energy generation, energy storage, and energy distribution. Energy generation, for example, I have an example here of a geothermal plant. Mm-hmm. Japan, as you know, is a volcanic country, so you can get a lot of your energy from the ground, basically, from here again, from geothermal. Interestingly, New Zealand, most of its power is geothermal. I didn't know that until I went there. Mm-hmm. Most of their energy and also all of Iceland is geothermal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they have a fascinating delivery system of delivering hot water from where it's generated, and it goes all through Reykjavik. The water is piped through all of the buildings, all of the homes in Reykjavik, and that's how they're getting their heating. So one is generation, the next is storage, and that's the batteries that I talked about, and the other is distribution. Within distribution, that's very, very interesting, particularly for solar panels, because you can have a solar panel on your home and you're using it immediately. So distribution is not a problem because you're generating it all by yourself, as opposed to making the energy, or I should say, generating the energy someplace, and you have to have cables and lines and such. And through those cables and lines, you have a wastage there or a loss there. And so you want to reduce that. So how do you do that? How do you distribute the energy from where it's produced to where it's used? Mm-hmm. Another one is, and I was just studying this today. Here again, this is on Sachs's seminar that he's giving. He was talking about cities, future cities, or smart cities. Mm-hmm. We've got to get people to do more walking, people having a better transit system, getting away from, here again, particularly internal combustion engines cars driving around in the cities and such. That has to be reduced. Japan is in Tokyo, I should say. Tokyo is a very, very good when it comes to public transportation. Very, very good. I don't know, in your area, you have to drive everywhere in the car or something like that?
More or less, right? Where I live right now, yes, but where I moved from, just a couple miles away, fantastic public transportation that I used every day. So it really varies here in the States. Yeah.
I'm on a bicycle a lot of the times, just a regular bicycle. Now, a lot of the cities around the world is having rental bicycles within the city. I don't know if they have that. When I was in, remember when I visited you over in Raleigh. Well, just before that, I was in Nashville. Mm-hmm. Nashville has bicycles for rent on the street.
Yep, and we just got them in Raleigh.
I think it's for free.
Yep. We just got them in Raleigh. You probably just missed it.
Oh, really? Okay, so that type of transportation's on the move.
Yep.
And they want to encourage people to go to a bicycle. It's healthier and certainly better for the environment. So these are the things that cities have to work on in the future. Another is biodiversity in the oceans. I talked about CO2 emissions. CO2 emissions, the higher and higher the emissions and the higher percentage of CO2 in the air, it affects our oceans. In the oceans, it makes it very acidic. That acidicity in the oceans starts to destroy the biodiversity within the oceans. So that's impacting on that. So biodiversity, anyone who lives on an island nations, they're always worried about fishing, and this comes into play. Another one is exactly the same, except for plant diversity, and I talked about that before. Another is wildlife. and such, wildlife biodiversity, which is something that has to be looked at. Air pollution and CO2. I talked a lot about CO2, but air pollution has gotten better and better in our part of the world, but that's not true in most of the industrialized, developing countries around the world, particularly in Africa and South Asia, India and Sri Lanka and that area. So pollution is still a major problem. So that could be something to address. And of course, clean water. Yeah. Clean water, the water is becoming a major problem in the future, particularly with population growth. As the population grows and grows, and obviously the country's economies get better and better, per person they want to consume more. And if there's more people, this puts a tremendous stress on the environment, particularly in the use of water. So in Africa and a lot of places around the world, having clean water is a major problem. It is not a major problem in all of the industrialized countries in the world, though. And so how can we take all of these examples that I gave you, Brian, and use information technology? That's what I'm kind of thinking about. Right. And if anybody is interested in one of these topics and can contribute, maybe we can redirect them to someone.
Yeah, that sounds great. But you mentioned at the beginning of your talk here that the UN was aware of many of these issues, right? Don't they have goals associated with some of these things?
Right. Those are the goals I meant. Here again, here's your sustainable development goals. Now, for this particular talk, all I thought about really is environmental issues. There are 17 goals you see there, but in terms of environment only, one, of course, is clean water and sanitation. And it has its goals. And then under the goals, it has targets. And under those targets, it has indicators of whether those targets are being reached. That's the same thing with affordable and clean energy. Here again, this is moving towards solar energy or wind energy or maybe nuclear energy and such, and away from the burning of fossil fuels. Another one is sustainable cities, which I talked about a little bit a few minutes ago. In here again, better transportation within the city, maybe better processing of garbage, better delivery of clean water and such. That falls in that category. And I talked about the climate. That's number 13, climate action or climate considerations. I talked about the oceans and life under the water and such. That's another. And land, life on land, particularly deforestation and stripping away forests and such, and of course ruining the biodiversity within the oceans. So these are the main ones here that I talk about. And now this is environmental related. The next topic or the next subject or next article will be on human suffering, which falls into this same grouping.
I see. So we'll look forward to that.
And that's basically it. As I say, this is the first part of 3 parts. This is on the environment. The next one will be on human suffering in particular. And then the third one is how do we build an organization, particularly an open organization, to start governing all these problems. I see.
Well, this has been great. Thanks, Ron, for getting us started with this really important conversation, sharing your research and thinking with us. I really appreciate it, and I know our viewers do too. Thanks a lot. We'll look forward to talking to you in our next installment then.
Sounds very good. And looking forward to the article. The article will be out shortly, I guess, huh?
I hope so. Yep. As soon as we can get it up, and then folks can have a read and leave you some feedback.
Very good.
Great. All right. Just a reminder to everybody watching, if you're interested in open organizations and the topics we're discussing in these videos, please join us at theopenorganization.org or theopenorganization.community to join the conversation. And Ron's there, and you can ask him questions if you'd like, and he'd be happy to answer. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Ron.
Thank you. Take care.